Hello, my name is Kayla. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about A Song of Ice and Fire. Yes, groundbreaking, I know. What? Never been done before on my channel. Today I'm going to talk about the 5th book, A Dance with Dragons, and I'm going to do the same thing that I usually do, which is start with the summary, then talk about character development, and then give my overall thoughts on the book. The first real chapter is a Tyrion chapter, which is greatly appreciated because last time we checked in with Tyrion, he had just left King's Landing after murdering Tywin, so kind of a big deal. Varys helped him escape. Well, his brother helped him escape, but Varys had like all the connections. Tyrion is smuggled across the sea and he ends up in Pentos with Magister Illyrio. So if you remember from the first book, Magister Illyrio was housing Daenerys and her brother, and so this is where Tyrion ends up going. He gets to Pentos, stays with Illyrio, and then is shipped off to like basically go help Daenerys. And he's riding on this boat with who he thinks are just like traders, like these trading people, and actually it is Aegon Targaryen, Rhaegar's son. He was supposedly killed during Robert's rebellion. Tywin brought the bodies of Rhaegar's children, but I guess Aegon was saved at the last minute and some other kid was murdered instead, which is still really bad. This is Aegon Targaryen, and this guy John Connington, I forget his name. This guy who is really loyal to the Targaryens is like helping, and they've basically been raising him to be a leader since he was young, priming him for a big comeback. And Tyrion figures this out because he's really clever. So he's sent along with these people. They stop in Volantis, and he's stolen by Jorah Mormont, and then both of them end up being kidnapped and sold into slavery. They're sold into slavery and are chilling basically just outside Meereen with the Yunkai, who are pissed at Daenerys for freeing all the slaves and are like,
no, we're gonna still have slaves.
And there's a bunch of like mercenary and sellsword companies, and the Second Sons is one of those. So Tyrion and Jorah escape and go join the Second Sons and convince them to take them, and then also convince them to fight on Daenerys' side. Speaking of Daenerys, as I said, she's chilling in Meereen, freed the slaves, but things are not going as smoothly as she thought they would. She's still so young, so I think she had very much like that idea that, oh, you just free them and everything's fine, but that's not really the case. The Yunkai are going to war with like Meereen and Daenerys. They're not happy with Daenerys coming and trying to free all the slaves, and the Meereenese nobles are also not happy. So what starts happening is a bunch of Daenerys's soldiers and men have been killed by a group called the Sons of the Harpy, and a lot of free men are also killed by this group, the Sons of the Harpy. So that's like not cool. Daenerys is really worried about that, and to kind of appease the Meereenese nobles and try and make some peace, she actually marries this guy, Hizdar Zolorak, who is one of her council from Meereen, but he is descended from like some of the kind of best of the best Meereenese nobles, and so she marries him to show that she is on the side of the Meereenese people. It is a smart political move, or it seems to be a smart political move. Part of her alliance with Hizdar is he says, okay, you need to reopen the fighting pits, like this is a tradition in Meereen. She does, but only on the condition that it's not slaves who are fighting, it's freedmen who are willingly fighting. They reopen the fighting pits. She goes on the first big day of the fights with Hizdar. While they're in the fighting pits, the fighting is starting. Out of nowhere, Drogon, who had actually flown away, comes back, comes down into the fighting pit, and is like chilling there, acting all dragony. And so people start freaking out, and they are trying to hurt him and trying to kill him. And Daenerys is like, no, no. So she jumps out of the stands, she rushes down into the fighting pit, and then she just mounts him and rides him away.
So cool.
the coolest. So she rides Drogon away, and they end up going to the Dothraki Sea, where they kind of just chill for a little bit. I don't really know how long it is, but after like a couple days or a week or two, she's basically surviving on Drogon's leftover meat and stuff that he chars. After a little while, she runs into some Khal and like his Khalasar, and so we don't really fully know what's going to happen with that yet. But she runs into a Khal, and that's kind of like the last we hear of it. Back in Meereen, all of her advisors and people are still chillin'. Since she is gone, Hizdahr has taken rule over Meereen. Barristan is suspicious. Barristan, Detective Barristan, he is sniffing out the suspicious activity. Fat Belwas got really sick after he ate all of the crickets in the picnic that Hizdahr had packed for the fighting pits. So Fat Belwas gets really sick, and they come to the conclusion that those crickets or locusts or whatever they were poisoned, and Barristan is like, well, Hizdahr is the one who brought the picnic, so something's not right. So he goes to Hizdahr's room and basically like arrests him and is all,
Hey, this was shady as heck. Like, explain yourself.
that's what Barristan's up to. Arya is in this book again, even though she's in the last book. She went blind at the end of the last book. That was just temporary so she could learn to do stuff with her other senses. She is still chilling with the Faceless Men, survived the blindness. She's now officially an apprentice after she finished a task. She like murdered this weird guy. Oh, there's so much good stuff that happens in this. Okay, let's move up to the Wall. Jay Snow became Lord Commander, and he basically is like, take me seriously. He actually like executes Janos, whatever, Slint, because he's being the worst and like won't even take orders. So he's like, And then he makes a deal with the wildlings. This is like
Super controversial.
Jon Snow makes a deal with the wildlings that they can come through the Wall and have the protection of the Wall, the physical and magical protection of the Wall, and access to shelter as long as they help hold the Wall and help fight the others. So basically he's saying like, let's merge our sides because we have a common enemy and it's bigger than us. I really, really like this plot line, by the way, because I think it just shows that people in power have to often make like difficult decisions, and even decisions that might say like, hey, at one point I was wrong or I was not focusing on the right things. Anyway, so he makes that deal with the wildlings. The Night's Watch is pissed because the wildlings have been their enemies for a really long time. The Night's Watch is really getting kind of unruly, and meanwhile Stannis is chilling there. He like saved them in their last war. He's still chilling up at the Wall, and he actually burns Mance Rayder and marches south to meet the Bolton forces. So he burns Mance Rayder, but Melisandre stays behind at the Wall and brings Jon Snow into her room and is like, actually, Mance Rayder's not dead, here he is. I did some witchcraft to make it look like that was Mance Rayder, but it wasn't. And Jon Snow's like, okay. And then she also tells him that she had a vision of a girl coming north on a horse. And she describes the girl, and Jon is like,
oh my gosh, that's Arya. She's probably fleeing Ramsay Bolton.
So Jon sends Mance and a couple wildling women like down to Winterfell to go rescue Arya. He doesn't know that it's not really Arya, but he does that anyway. The girl in the vision comes to the Wall, and it turns out it's not Arya, but it's actually a girl named Alice Karstark, who is the Karstark heir, I guess. And she's fleeing her uncle, who is like trying to take control of Carhold. I forget what their castle's called, but I think it's Carhold. So she's fleeing her uncle, and in order to take control of the castle, she real quick marries Signor of Then, or whatever his name is, one of the wildling leaders. Towards this time, Jon receives a letter from Ramsay, and he doesn't know whether or not it's true, but Ramsay says he wants Arya back, he wants Theon back, and Jon Snow was like, wait a second, like, I don't have Arya and Theon. So he does get like really mad, and he's like,
Nah, like, we're done. I'm gonna go kill Ramsay. Who wants to come help me? Night's Watch, who's gonna help me kill Ramsay?
and they're all like, didn't we decide to put that all behind when we came to the wall? So they stab him like a bunch. Meanwhile, Bran is north of the wall. The only update on Bran is that he's treeing out. Like, he's just warging and treeing and being a tree, and that's the only update with Bran. So let's catch up with Davos. Davos has a really interesting plot in this book. Davos is sent by Stannis to go win support of the Manderleys, who are at, what's it called, like White Harbor, maybe? And the Manderleys actually take him as a prisoner, pretend to execute him to appease the Lannisters, and then actually make like a secret deal with him. Wyman Manderley is like, I'm faking support for the Boltons and the Lannisters. I'm actually trying to like secretly get revenge for like Robb Stark's death. He's like, I know where Rickon is. Rickon's on like some random island and it's really remote. So Manderley is like, I'll support Stannis if you can go retrieve Rickon and get all of Stark's supporters like behind me. Davos is like, okay, like that makes sense. That's basically where we leave that. I think he's gonna go find Rickon, so we'll kind of see what happens with that in the next book. I'm actually very excited to see what happens. For Winterfell, Theon and Jane escape. They do have the help of Mance and his spearwives initially, but I think they're all basically killed. And so Theon and Jane like jump off the edge of Winterfell into a snowbank and are captured by Stannis' forces. What's happening in King's Landing? So in King's Landing, Cersei is captured by the Faith, and she was imprisoned for so many things. Murder, incest. She basically pleads guilty to some of the charges, but says she is not guilty of incest and of murdering her husband Robert, her late husband Robert. So she sort of pleads half guilty and then is released after her atonement, which is like a naked walk of shame through King's Landing back to the Red Keep. It's a really humbling moment for her. It's an interesting read. I liked Cersei's chapters in this book. I thought they were really interesting. So once she gets back, she realizes that the control of, like, the ruling control has been Kevin Lannister, her uncle. So her uncle Kevin has been in control. So he actually goes to meet with Pycelle, and when he goes to meet with Pycelle this one night, Varys shows up, kills them both. It was a very shocking turn of events. So Varys shows up to King's Landing, murders Pycelle, and then shoots Kevin with a crossbow. And Kevin realizes Pycelle's already been murdered. And Varys actually like explains to Kevin, he's like, hey, like my ultimate purpose has been to help Aegon, not dead Targaryen, to take the throne. Yeah, by the way, P.S., like Aegon's alive and he's been groomed for this since day one, and like I'm on his side. And so, yeah, sorry, bro. And then he has his little birds like literally just stab Kevin to death a bunch. There's a lot of horrifying scenes in these books, so I'm probably gonna actually read something happier after this one. So that's basically where we leave off. I'm so excited for The Winds of Winter to come out because I can't wait to see what happens next. Let's go over characters. Some of the character development that happened in this book, some of the best moments for characters. I think that for Cersei, one of the just obviously best things for her was like that really humbling experience of having that walk of atonement. And there's even some points where she's saying like, oh, I was a queen, and now I'm just another woman, and I just have, like, they're looking at her body and they're like, oh, it's just like, it's the body of a mother, like she has stretch marks, she has this and that. And it's really interesting. It's good and bad, right? So for her, she might see that as a really bad thing, but in a lot of ways, it's also just a great reminder that we're all people. Underneath it all, we're just all people with imperfections, and I thought that was kind of cool. I don't know if that was the intention, but it was a nice little moment. I really liked what happened with Tyrion in this book, because I think he started off this book at such a point of indifference after finding out the truth about Tysha, which is haunting him still. But he finds out the truth about Tysha, he murders his father, and then he's just like, he does not care. He is on like a binge, he's drinking so much, he does not care basically what happens to him. And throughout the book, he kind of meets characters and realizes there are things for him to do outside of Westeros. And instead of maybe feeling so sorry for himself, he can do something of use, do something helpful. And I think that big moment is once he's enslaved, he realizes like, oh no, like I do care what happens to me, and we've got to get out of here. And so they go over to the Second Sons. And so I really like seeing that kind of journey of his. And a big part of it was Penny, who's another dwarf he meets. And there's quite a few little moments where he kind of slowly starts to come out of that. I really liked his progression in this book, and I'm excited to see what happens with him in the next book. Barristan. Okay, Barristan was like such an unexpected, I've always liked his character, but in this book, okay, he was like cracking open mysteries, he was doing like some like Hardy Boy stuff, I don't even know, it was kind of funny. He really brought it forward. He showed and just really proved his loyalty, because his queen is gone, and honestly, he's surrounded by a lot of questionable people who may or may not be on his side, and to like throughout all of that remain so faithful to his queen and still just keep, I don't know, I just really liked that. So that was just a great, that was very in character for Barristan, and it's very fitting, and so I really liked that. Jon Snow. Jon Snow has very interesting development in this, both good and bad. So a big part of what he discovers in becoming Lord Commander is killing the boy. And what that kind of means is like you have to kill the boy in you and become a man. And so he's really discovering that he's not in the Night's Watch as a brother anymore, and that's really hard to interact with other members of the Night's Watch. And it's hard for him because he might have to make decisions that are unpopular, or decisions that seem very cold but are for what he feels is the greater good. And so this book heavily highlights the difficulties of leadership, and especially leadership thrust onto somebody who doesn't necessarily want it. And I know that's such a big trope, like the reluctant leader or the reluctant hero, but it's a trope for a reason. It's very interesting, and people do struggle with things like this in real life. Not unlike if you get a promotion at work and suddenly you're working above your friends and coworkers. That's really uncomfortable, and it's hard to navigate. So he struggles with that, and he's still only like, I forget, he's like 16 or 17. He's still really young. And so people who are older than him are maybe resentful having to take orders from this kid, basically. So he struggles a lot with that, and he makes some decisions that are good and some decisions that are questionable, because he's still honestly probably just really hormonal at his age. And like an example, he makes a really hard but good decision with the wildlings and bringing them through, and he knew the risk in that. He knew that people would be upset about it, but also he makes a really questionable decision towards the end, and he's like, oh, I'm gonna go kill Ramsay. Like, F. Ramsey, this is so stupid, who wants to come with me? And that's a decision where that's rooted in emotion, and it's not for the greater good of the Night's Watch, and he pays for it. And so I really thought that he had an interesting journey of navigating leadership, and in a lot of ways he was really good at it, but in a lot of ways he had to put aside what he felt he needed to do in order to lead. So I really liked that character development as well. And I think those are the main ones that I felt were just the most interesting. My final thoughts are, I think I liked it better than A Feast for Crows. I definitely believe this ended on a bit more of a kind of cliffhanger for several characters. There were like big cliffhangers for prominent characters. So that's kind of frustrating. I really want the next book now because I'm kind of like, I want to know what happens to them. So that would be like actually probably my biggest complaint is I hope that that comes soon. However, it was really well written, and once again, I say every time, but the descriptiveness that he includes in his books transport me. Like, they absolutely transport me there. They're very engaging and they're fun. Like, they have really interesting kind of political plot lines and character developments and emotional storylines, and I love the taking a chapter to focus really deeply in a character and have their inner thoughts. So I really, really liked that. So this is back up there with book 3 for me, just really good. And I also have to say that something that immediately took me with this book was the prologue. We're north of the wall. It's really very eerie and creepy. And so this particular prologue was from the viewpoint of, I forget his name, but he's a skin changer wildling. Varamir, I think it's Varamir. And it just is really eerie, and because his writing is so descriptive, you're like, oh, I feel like I'm a skin changer right now. Yeah, I really like that. This reminded me a lot of the prologue of the first book, which just, that hooked me, and this kind of hooked me back again. It gave a really good feeling for how it is north of the wall right now. So it also helped, I think, when it came time to deal with like the wildlings and wanting to let them through. You were really rooting to let them through because you knew how scary it was north of the wall. You knew that like it just wasn't, you're like, no, like let them through, please let them through, just let them through. It's too scary to think of the idea of having more others, like having more whites, and it's too scary to think of those people having to face that because they are still also humans. Like, wildlings are humans too. I also really like the focus on the theme in this book of like coming together for the greater good or to fight a greater cause. It reminds me a lot of things that are going on right now, and it does feel in that way like a bit of metaphor, commentary. I don't think that was intentional. I just think that these are recurring themes in history, in humanity, and it translates really well in the book. I think that this book, we're getting to a point where things are really getting that much deeper, and you can feel things coming to a head. You can feel things moving in unexpected ways and unexpected places. So I'm just really excited for the next one. I give this one 5 stars, 10 out of 10. Would definitely recommend. It's worth it if you're kind of unsure when you're reading A Feast for Crows. You're like, these aren't as good as they used to be. The quality does jump back up again in this book. If you're currently reading A Feast for Crows or you're about to read this book, I just would say like definitely the quality jumps back up again, and it's a really engrossing and engaging read. That's it for my video. I'm done with my summary. I've said all that I need to say. So if you have any thoughts on this, or if you agree or disagree with any of my thoughts, please let me know below in the comments. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and yeah, I will see you later. Hi. Oh my gosh. She is so cute.